Hello and welcome to the latest episode of This Month in Responsible AI. It's part of All Tech as Humans live stream series where we engage in conversations with responsible tech leaders, advocates, researchers, policymakers, practitioners, educators, journalists, and more. We are discussing some of the world's thorniest tech and society issues. We're so glad you're here with us for this important conversation. So, if you are joining us live, please be sure and say hi to each other in the chat, share a little about yourself, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if you have a question at any point, please drop that into the Q&A function. We're going to try to incorporate a few of those toward the end. So, I am your host today, Rebekah Tweed. I'm the executive director of All Tech as Human, and we are a nonprofit focused on advancing responsible tech. We are addressing tech's societal impact through community building and collaboration, through education, and through career development. So today we are celebrating our newest initiative, which I'm especially thrilled about. So yesterday we launched a series of 5 responsible AI courses. They are free. They're short. They can be finished in just a few hours. And the purpose is to offer an introductory understanding of the foundations of responsible AI. So we're looking at its principles, history, the evolution of the field, plus an exploration of what the professional roles are, current industry best practices, and then, of course, the ever-evolving governance landscape. So you can check that out at alltechishuman.org. Please let us know what you think. Super thrilled today to be joined by Hayden Field, senior AI reporter for The Verge, where she leads coverage of the biggest names in AI, including OpenAI, Anthropic, Google, Meta, and others, while also reporting on how these tools are being used, their societal implications, and how regulators are responding. Hayden Field, welcome to This Month in Responsible AI.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's great to be here.
So, okay, I feel like maybe we should be calling this episode This Month in OpenAI because there's just been this onslaught of releases and launches. It's been relentless, and I'm so excited to have you on today. I think you're the perfect person to walk us through this. And I want to talk about what this means for us, what kind of impacts these releases might be having on our lives. So I want to quickly give a little rundown of what all has happened in the past few weeks, all the launches. So um, just very recently, we've had a ChatGPT powered browser. We had Sora, the social network, and Sora 2, the multimodal video model that powers it. We've seen the release of the newly erotic ChatGPT, but don't worry, there's also new parental controls. We've had Pulse, so we can wake up with ChatGPT first thing in the morning. We have now these app integrations with Canva, Zillow, Coursera, Spotify, and others. And we have infrastructure deals with NVIDIA, AMD, Broadcom. And we have had more hints about this new hardware device that's in the works with Johnny Ive. So, first question for you, how are you keeping up?
That is a great question. Honestly, I don't know. It's crazy. It's definitely a lot of like, thinking you're gonna spend your day doing one thing and then just completely pivoting at a moment's notice. But, I'm finding peace in the chaos and just embracing the unknown. There is always something going on. And I try to just give my time to what I can bring the most context to and what I can, like, analyze and, give readers the best, view on with my experience of, like, 6 years of covering AI. So if it's a small, like, incremental update or, just a small piece of news or just a feature release, I may be more likely to skip it or give it to someone else. But if it's something that has a lot of societal implications or, you kinda see the writing on the wall with the problems that could come from it, or even just, something that's gonna change the industry a lot, then I try to definitely spend time on that.
Yeah. What do you think is going on with OpenAI releasing everything, from I don't know, all of these things that came through. I know Dev Day happened recently, and I know you were there for that. It feels a little bit like a flood the zone. Like there's so much happening all at once. Do you have any sense of like why there's so much happening now?
I think it's honestly because all of these companies are doing this at the same time. It's not just OpenAI. It feels like they're all kind of climbing ladders and advancing one rung, and then the other one advances one rung, and then the other one advances one rung. And they're all trying to just keep up with each other and stay in the news and stay at the top of mind of consumers. I think they're all trying to corner the market on different things right now and really just be part of consumers' everyday lives and enterprise and governments, obviously. But for consumers, they're thinking, okay, like how can we get in their routines first thing in the morning? And how can we stay with them at work? And how can we be with them, in their personal life after work? So they're all trying to kind of desperately grab user attention besides their work in enterprise and government, obviously. But yeah, none of these companies are really generating profit yet. So they're really trying to figure out how to do that, especially as compute becomes more expensive and, harder to get. So it's definitely, I think, just a arms race where everyone's trying to do the same thing at the same time. And also, a lot of these companies, including OpenAI, have had a lot of bad press lately. So, whenever they can flood the zone with feature releases and updates and products, it helps drown out some of that noise, probably they're thinking.
Yeah, that sounds exactly right to me. So I want to get into some of the societal impacts and what the potential implications are of some of these new developments across like what you mentioned. We have products and features and new model capabilities. So the first one I want to talk about is Sora. I feel like that one maybe made the biggest splash. And you had like this social network, but also this new model that's powering it, or a new version of the model. So yeah, can you share a little bit about like what that's about, and what OpenAI is doing there?
Yes. So it's interesting, testing Sora. I remember when they showed me a demo of it before it was out. It was the most terrifying thing I had seen in terms of like multimodal AI because it was the first time that I couldn't tell the difference between AI generated video or images. Obviously, this is video, but it was the first time in general that I could not tell the difference between AI and reality ever. So, there were a bunch of, obviously, if there's something, that's fantastical, like, Sam Almond drinking out of a huge juice box or something, then, you're going to know it's not real. But there were a lot of videos they showed that were very run of the mill, like two people talking in a room or someone opening a refrigerator, someone pitching to an investor, things like that. And they all seemed completely real. And there was zero sign that it was AI generated besides, if you were to download it, a watermark. Even they were very also proud of like their physics research that had led to this, that we weren't seeing any more six-fingered hands, or if someone dove into a, lake in a video, the ripples looked accurate. They had done a lot of research on, world building and how to make these like consequences of an action in a video seem real. But, it's the thing I was wondering about first was, of course, there were a lot of people depicted in these videos, and you can give your own permission on whether people can depict you and cameos or who can do that. But still, there's always ways to get around things like that, like describing someone to generate that looks like someone else, maybe, even if you're not specifically saying, oh, generate, a cameo of this person. You can describe the person enough that they will generate someone like that. The other thing that bothered me was the fact that immediately, we saw a ton of watermark removal tools proliferating everywhere. And it's very easy to remove these watermarks, honestly. A lot of people are coding their own tools for doing that. A lot of existing tools offer that. So yeah, it was just kind of the first time I saw it, I was like, you know what, this is going to be a misinformation nightmare more than we already have. And I think it has, started on the path towards that. I've seen a bunch of like non-watermarked videos out there. We're seeing, I'm sure our government may start using some of these, if history is any guide. So yeah, it's definitely some people think it's so fun. I've had a lot of friends love, making videos of their pets, and a lot of OpenAI employees are having fun like making inside joke videos with their friends and stuff. But, besides the copyright stuff and, the potential for misinformation, there's also a lot of other potential pitfalls here. So it was definitely a big moment when I saw it for the first time.
Yeah, it sounds like it's like that ordinariness of it makes it even more concerning. It does feel like, I think this one had a lot of buzz. A lot of people had strong reactions to it. Some people I heard were saying like, "Oh, this is just a flash in the pan. It's going to get boring for people." But then other people, I think, and what I tend to think is that it will have staying power because of those cameos, and it has this real, like, personalization and that ordinariness, um, and the potential for memification. It's like they worked really hard to make this fun, at least for a little while. So, yeah, I wonder if they're doing it because of that stickiness, and of course, like you mentioned, they need to bring in revenue in whatever way possible. They're trying to pull in more data for the next generation of models. Um, but yeah, what's most interesting to me about it is, this normalization and this attempted like memification of deep fakes almost as a genre, like as desirable content, when of course the responsible AI community, we have long perceived this as very risky, leading to many potential harms, undermining the information ecosystem itself, having implications for like what a shared basis for truth is, and ultimately democracy itself. So, yeah, I think that one's definitely something to keep an eye on. And curious if you particularly think it is going to have staying power, or if you think this is something that might like get boring quickly for people.
I think it's hard because I feel like, I made predictions like this before and I've been very wrong, but I will say, I think that the technology will have staying power in that, this is a huge game-changing moment for the AI industry, misinformation, deepfakes, for sure. I don't know if the app, like as a social media app, will have staying power. And I think that's because I've just seen so many like really buzzy social media apps come and go, especially during the pandemic. We've seen a bunch try to compete and then just fall flat, or they're a novelty for a little while and they fall flat. Like Be Real is a great example.
Yeah.
There's like David Dobrik's photo app. There's been a bunch like that. But I will say, I think this will probably keep like a loyal set of users that really love it. But something that Sam Altman said during Dev Day, like in a Q&A with the reporters, which I thought was really interesting, was that he did not anticipate that a lot of people would just be using this kind of privately for videos to download and send to a group chat of like 2 or 3 people. He thought everyone was going to be either like just lurking it or posting videos for everyone to see. He didn't seem to anticipate that it would be like, a lot of people weren't really comfortable having their likeness out there for everyone, but they did want to generate videos and just send it to a couple of trusted people off the platform. And so I think that's what we might see this end up becoming. And I think they might be building features to that end as well, because, it's just something they didn't anticipate about how people were really going to use it in real life. And that seems to be kind of like a leading way that people are doing that.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So yeah, it might become like a fixture of the group chat, but like, I mean, I can't imagine, there might be a gendered aspect to this. I don't know, but like, I would never allow my likeness
Same.
out there.
I really wouldn't either. It's like, I don't know. I already get weird about, which social media platform I'm really professional on versus my personal life. So it's like, maybe it's just because we have, seen it all these days. But yeah, I definitely would not be like, everyone generate images with my likeness anytime, anywhere.
Exactly. Okay, so yeah, kind of like following that thread a little bit, I'd like to talk a little bit next about, ChatGPT like veering into the lane of like erotic ChatGPT on the heels of adding parental controls. And just yeah, can you talk us through like what's happening there?
Totally. So yeah, it was really interesting. I remember a couple months ago, Sam Allman was on an interview with a YouTuber, and he said that he was really proud that OpenAI hadn't juiced numbers for short-term gain with something like a sex bot avatar. And he was appearing to maybe take a dig at Elon Musk at the time. And now it's been a few months and things have changed. He's gone full-fledged into the treat adults like adults. Um, view. And I do know that that's partly because, some people have been asking OpenAI for this. There's been a small but vocal group that have asked for them to do this. So I'm sure it's been on their mind. But it is interesting that they would, timing wise, announce something like this right after the parental controls. I'm not sure why the timing was what it is. But, yeah, it was interesting to see you know, reaction on social media. Some people were like memifying it to no end, mocking the company for like pivoting from its AGI mission seemingly to erotica. And Altman actually had to respond to those like memes and jokes a few days later. He said, "Oh, I didn't anticipate the erotica news blowing up as much as it did. It was just one example of what we're doing to like give people more freedom. So yeah, it was interesting, for sure. But, I think it might also be tied to just the fact that the company is concerned about profit and compute to fund its larger mission. It may think that this is something it needs to do along the way to reach its eventual goals. And when I was in a Q&A with executives at Dev Day, they could not stop talking about how much they would eventually need to turn a profit, and they need an ever increasing amount of compute to like reach their goals. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting rollout to watch. I also thought it was interesting that Altman wasn't super specific about how the company was going to aim to protect users in mental health crises. Like, what happens when, the persona that you've been talking to has its memory reset or its personality changes with the latest update and the connection is broken. We've seen a bunch of like subreddits and other conversations online of people being really worried when, a companion of sorts changes and they're desperately trying to get it back. So yeah, it's been an interesting thing to watch. I get a bunch of outreach from people going through problems with emotional connection to AI systems, whether they know it or not. You may get those too. A lot of journalists I've spoken with also get them. So yeah, I do think it'll be interesting to see if this makes things worse in terms of like, emotional reliance on AI, people that are already in vulnerable positions, falling into more vulnerable positions because now there's like a sexual aspect involved. Even like a 14-year-old boy last February died by suicide after romantically engaging with a character AI chatbot. And so, yeah, I don't know. It's interesting to see how people might use this. And then the last thing I'll say is, there have been something I saw recently in a report was that there was a account of like jailbroken chatbots being used by pedophiles to role play sexually assaulting minors, and there were 100,000 such chatbots found online. And that's not an OpenAI thing, but I do think that anytime you introduce like erotica into these systems, there's just a lot of potential for misuse. So yeah, we'll definitely have to be watching that.
Yeah, no, that's really insightful. I feel like there's when you're kind of thinking through the relationships that people have with these tools, there's this real like trust bifurcation where I feel like there are people who are like deeply trusting these tools, and then there's in general, like if you zoom out a little bit, there's definitely like a larger trust issue that people have with AI. They don't trust it in general, and there are a lot of like negative connotations about it. And so I think this is kind of what struck me about this was like pairing it with the parental controls, is that like potentially you have all these parents who are maybe likely not to be trusting like OpenAI to be having to really be like putting all the safeguards in place necessary for their kids who use ChatGPT. And I can see people maybe leaning more toward, or parents leaning more toward, Claude, or for instance, or Gemini, instead of like taking like rolling the dice on ChatGPT or Meta AI, or God forbid, Grok. So okay, next, I want to talk a little about Pulse. So this one did not make quite as big of a splash. So I don't know if everyone has maybe heard of this one. So can you talk us through like what Pulse is and what OpenAI might be trying to do with this?
Sure. So yeah, Pulse is a really interesting feature, and I think it did fly a little bit under the radar, but it was one of the features that I actually thought was the biggest deal in the past year or so, maybe just as an average consumer. For me, it was interesting because it's a use of agentic AI that is actually probably pretty useful for the average person in a way that some of the other updates have not been. Maybe those are sometimes updated, like, marketed towards power users or people that are, really into AI, whereas this I thought could like reach a wider swath. Um, for better or worse. So it's basically a way for ChatGPT to research things for you overnight. So you say every morning you start your day with ChatGPT. That's what they're aiming for here. So maybe you say, hey, every morning I want to have a vocab lesson for this language I'm learning, or hey, every day can you send me a new Pilates workout that targets like a different area of the body. Sometimes if you connect it to your calendar, it can say, hey, like I see you have this run and then you have a dinner later. That's going to be a little bit tight. Here's the best way to walk to get to the dinner. And here's what you might want to order since I know you're gluten free. So it's a little bit scary because it does have a ton of personal information about you if you allow it to. Again, it's if you allow it. But I can see a lot of people relying on this because if you start your day on if you start your day with something and it's kind of assistant like in this way, I mean, it is pretty helpful. But there's also the tendency that it's going to learn a lot about you from your calendar, from your preferences. Again, if you connect it, your email, your contacts. So yeah, I was definitely interested to see how wide ranging this could be, and like how like just many people would probably find it useful.
Yeah. Yeah, and for it to be as useful as possible, you likely will be allowing it to access all of these other areas of your life, and other, connecting other pieces. Um, and yeah, I feel like that does open things up for this monetization push that might include advertising, that this might be a very juicy target for, like, very personal advertising. And yeah, just wondering if you have any thoughts on the ads piece there, or if is there any, um have we heard anything about, like, whether ads are eventually going to be a part of this? Like, what's the public, um, uh, piece of that from Sam Altman or from OpenAI?
Totally. So yeah, that's a great question. When I was in a Q&A with some executives recently, they said they hadn't ruled out ads in Pulse, that there were no concrete plans right now, they said, but they definitely said they were talking about it. And Sam Allman himself said that really enjoys Instagram ads, that they're really useful for him and he finds things he likes. So because of that, he was citing that when he was talking about this, and he was like, you know what? Um, I'm not gonna roll out introducing that type of relevant ad within Pulse in the future. So, yeah, I definitely could see them doing this. They didn't seem to rule it out at all, and it also, they even had kind of a framework for it, which is they wanted it to be as useful as Instagram ads if they ever did roll it out. The other part of things is that I think they want to turn a profit from this also because they originally planned to roll this feature out to everyone. But because it's so compute heavy, they could only roll it out to pro users. So that means that, I think they want some way to fuel them being able to like expand the usage.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like they're kind of caught in this space where, like, they need more people to be, like, really invested in this and to be able to monetize it in these ways, but then also, um, the incremental cost for each new person to do that is substantial. Yeah, and I feel like comparing it to Instagram sounds, convenient, but ChatGPT knows a lot more about you than Instagram. So okay. All right, so moving on, I wanna, talk about the app integration. I think that one potentially has a lot of implications as well, leaning into kind of is this a part of kind of this larger agentic play of having, a lot of different, uh, just building in a lot of capabilities and being able to do and act on behalf of the user.
It definitely is. I think this is part of, I kind of think that AI agents are in general like one of the buzziest parts of the industry right now. I mean, it's been since 2023, but I think 2023 was when everyone was talking about it. 2024 was when people were trying to deploy them and like make them useful, but like, it was pretty experimental and not really working that well. This year, they're still not working that well, but they are definitely working way better than last year. And we're seeing, some type of progress. So I think that's the play here. Basically, they've introduced agents for enterprise and governments now, and they've introduced them for consumers, but they haven't been received that well because they haven't been working maybe as well as they could be. And so this is their play of saying, hey, consumers use this, it's going to be actually useful for your life. And so the ones they launched right then that day when they announced apps inside ChatGPT were booking.com, Canva, Coursera, Expedia, Figma, Spotify, and Zillow. So you could be like, hey, make me a playlist for my like workout today. And it would, look at your Spotify and say, oh, maybe she likes this type of music. Let me make her a playlist. Zillow was the most interesting one I saw in that demo because, let's say I was looking for a house in New York or something. not only could I, like, give it some, tips on, like, what I was looking for, but then I could ask follow-up questions about the listing, like, if it it appears in a little window inside ChatGPT if you, allow it to, and then you can say, "Oh, actually, no, I don't wanna see all these, narrow it down to ones with, like, a backyard," something like that, and so, yeah, it was pretty useful from the demo, but, we've heard different things about how useful they are in practice, they said this was an early stage, that these things are gonna get better. They're also planning to add more apps like DoorDash, OpenTable, Target, Uber. But one of the most interesting things I learned in my interviews with some OpenAI employees was that, this is supposed to be something that, well, they said this in the announcement, but it's supposed to be something that individual developers can, really find success with. Like if you make your own app, they want you to be able to hopefully have like everyone on ChatGPT using it. But you have to pass like, their safeguard check and their design check, and they control the distribution. But this is part of them all kind of trying to become an operating system, like an Apple app store of sorts. So it's going to be interesting to see what they let through their guardrails and what mistakes they might make in that regard when an individual developer, pitches them an app and, see kind of what comes down the line from that.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting that OpenAI is referencing this as, like, our new operating system, and that definitely does feel like more of this push to become as integrated into our daily habits as possible, and yeah, just thinking through, we have so many existing issues that have not been, like, fully addressed and solved, and so now we're kind of adding layers and building on top of that shaky foundation, which I think could be concerning as we move forward. Was there any word about like payments and like is that integrated into this as well?
Yes. So I think, I know you can now make purchases on Etsy through the chatbot, kind of part of its overall push to integrate into the rest of the web. And then, with DoorDash, Uber, OpenTable, it seems like even with Expedia and Booking.com, yeah, it seems like you will be able to, or you can already in some cases, make payments through it. So, yeah, there's definitely a lot at risk here. And, anytime there's like a system offering so many things at once and there's payments involved, health advice involved, potential future plans of yours involved. There's just a lot at stake for sure.
Right, right. Um, okay, I have one final question and then we'll turn it to a few audience questions. So, we've got a couple coming in through the Q&A. If you have put a question in the chat, please move that over to the Q&A so we can see it. So okay, Hayden, the question that I have, the last one is you it's about the kind of like the hardware device being designed by Johnny Ive. Do we know any more about that? Has there been any like, hints coming out about like what that could be?
Yes. So I think, it was interesting. They did a fireside chat, Joni Ive and Sam Altman at Dev Day, and it left a lot to be desired. There wasn't really any like specifics coming out of that at all. But we have seen some reports from like the FT and others that have said it's a palm-sized device. It's going to lack a screen. It's like designed that you can take it out of your pocket and set it on a desk. It's supposed to have like a microphone, a speaker, and a camera, or multiple cameras, and it's supposed to be the first of like a group of devices being developed by them that's going to be released maybe in like late 2026 or early 2027. That's what the reports say. But I've also heard that they're trying to solve like a bunch of issues that they're running into, like how often it should speak, what the personality should be, the potential compute issues for like something that's always listening and always offering thoughts. And then also I think, I mean, they haven't said this and I haven't heard this in any reports, but I do wonder how well it's really going to work if it's in a bag, in your pocket, in your, backpack, whatever, because, we at The Verge tested the Friend AI device and it's like, it's designed to be worn around your neck. So it's pretty easily accessible. But even if you had like a jacket on or like a really light layer over it, it could barely hear you. So I'm just wondering like how this will really work. And also lots of privacy implications and stuff like that, but also just how is it really going to work? They might not know either yet. We'll see.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, there's the practicality of it. But then yeah, the privacy part, of course, like that's one thing that we're thinking a lot about at All Tech is Human, and I feel like this feels to me like it is absolutely like the next phase in kind of these frontier model developers trying to push like the scaling laws now that like all of the catalog digital data has been ingested and trained on. I think it is about generating new, organic real-time data. I think like with a social network like Sora, that makes sense, but then also putting embodied AI out into the world that is recording not only you, but everyone around you. So yeah, I think that's yeah, that's something to keep an eye on. Um, okay, so we do have quite a few questions coming in. We're not gonna have time to get to all of them, so I'm just gonna select a couple, and thank you everyone for putting these questions in. So from Dan Gorman, we have the question, how are companies justifying the significant spending on AI and data centers when they are largely still struggling to prove ROI? Any thoughts on that, Hayden?
I think it's all a sales pitch and who you know. We've seen a bunch of AI companies cozying up to the Trump administration, to other large chip makers, infrastructure providers. A lot of the stuff really comes down to like who you have, like whose number you have in your phone. I saw that one report came out about OpenAI doing something really interesting, and it literally caused, deal talks to resume with a major provider. So yeah, I mean, I think it's really just about the confidence and them saying this is going to be big, trust us, and the AI bubble. Even Sam Altman himself at Dev Day said there was a AI, some parts of AI were pretty bubbly. And so if he's admitting that, I think there's a lot of hype around the technology right now, especially the term agents. There's a lot of hype around, using it for governments. Scale AI did a bunch of partnerships with like world governments in the past year, offering them agents and other ways to sort through all their data, which, that's a whole nother topic. But yeah, I think that basically, we're just going to see, a lot more collaboration based on, people having FOMO about AI and hoping to get in on it and afraid that they're going to fall behind if they don't.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, yeah, the next question we have is from an anonymous attendee asking about Copilot. I'm not sure how much you cover Copilot, but what are your thoughts on Copilot in terms of responsibility and how it compares to the other AI providers, considering it piggybacks off ChatGPT and Claude on request, particularly interested in corporate responsibility and ESG reporting. You have anything to talk about there, Hayden?
Yeah, it is interesting. I've tested Copilot less in the last like year and a half, but I will say like there's nothing that makes me think it's more or less responsible than the others. So far I think it has the same issues and with health data, other stuff, image generation, I've seen similar issues to the others. And, a lot of these companies kind of take cues from each other on what they're going to take really seriously or what type of controls or safeguards to introduce. So, right now I don't see any big differences between any of the major AI companies. And I will say like a year and a half ago or so, I wrote a big feature story on Microsoft Copilot, uh, kind of having these really weird, sexualized, violent images of women turn up when you generated images, even if you didn't ask for that, like they would just show up sometimes. And so I know that like some engineers within the company had flagged this stuff internally, and for months they were just ignored. The company apparently just didn't do anything about them. I published this story immediately they were fixed. So, I think some of this stuff is like, they don't have a lot of people working on some of the things that they should. And sometimes that results in things getting put by the wayside. I don't believe that they were like, yeah, we're never going to do anything about this, but it probably got deprioritized. So, yeah, I mean, the incentives within all these companies can be a little off. So, it's something we'll definitely have to watch.
Yeah. I think journalism plays such an important role in the ecosystem, and so I'm glad your story pushed some action there. Um, okay, so let's see. We don't have time for a lot more, so let me add one more in here. I'm going to go down to Christina Stewart. How do you think we can give everyday citizens a voice in regulating AI companies at the state level? Is lobbying effective, or do forums that lawmakers read make more sense? Um, yeah, and I'll chime in on that after you.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think Rebecca will have more thoughts on that, but, I do think that, people coming together for collective action is a great way. We've seen a bunch of, people coming together to share their thoughts on this stuff in New York, Denver, California, a bunch of cities, and, when there is kind of an outcry on anything, we see change, really, and also, voting with your dollar in terms of actual voting and like voting on change really works too. One example is in Georgia right now, North Georgia, they're considering putting a new data center. And I've seen like a bunch of protests happening or people showing up to public forums to share their thoughts with lawmakers. So, yeah, I mean, I think that anytime people come together to talk about change, it works. At least that's what I hope.
Yes, no, completely agree. I think, um, I mean, that's a central part of All Tech is Human as an organization is that we as the public deserve to have a say in how these technologies impact us and our lives, and that it's not just like tech companies that get to decide that for us. And so, yeah, I would say any of those avenues are appropriate and useful. And I would encourage you to check out alltechashuman.org because there are a lot of organizations that are providing really specific ways to get involved, different campaigns to get involved in. And like there are often, when it comes to regulations, there will be calls for public opinion and feedback. So yeah, I would say like one of the organizations that I really just want to call out and say like please get involved with their policy work is the Center for AI and Digital Policy. They have a lot of great work in that space. So yeah, just want to encourage everyone to remain as involved as possible because that's what this is all about. Um, and yeah, I've been seeing a lot, same as you, Hayden, as far as like the data centers and communities getting involved in, making their voice heard about what's happening in their own backyards and in their own communities. And often, in order to get through like local ordinances, they have to have an opportunity for the public to give feedback. So pay attention to those and make sure you get involved in your own communities. Okay, final question here. And this one is for All Tech as Human. It's about the courses. How much do the new AI courses cost? How long will it take to complete them? Who's the target audience of these courses? Thank you for asking, Sarah Lenzian. I'm sorry, Saran Lenzian. So the courses are free thanks to the generous support of the Patrick J. McGovern Foundation. We accept donations on our website, by the way. But yeah, the courses are free. They're very quick, so you can complete them all within a few hours. There are 5 of them. They're intentionally very short, leading to who the target audience is. We're really trying to provide, an uh, uh, just an open door, an area where people can enter the space, can start to understand what responsible AI is all about, like what the foundations are, and then how the field developed, what the roles are. So it's really geared mostly for people who are trying to understand the space. But we do have like some of the later courses get a little deeper, but really it's meant to be a springboard for further learning, and it's a way for us to kind of provide this like basic level of understanding for people within our community who are trying to get onboarded into responsible tech and responsible AI in particular. So yeah, encourage everyone to check that out. alltechashuman.org has that information. And we're really excited about the new courses and we plan to be doing a lot more of them in the future. So anyway, thank you to everyone for joining us. That brings us to the end of our time together today. I want to thank you so much, Hayden. This was very enjoyable. I feel like I learned so much and really appreciate you giving us a glimpse into this. So yeah,
Oh, yeah, thank you
thank you.
so much. It's an honor.
Awesome. And we will be posting this on YouTube, so you can check it out there. You can share it with other people. The recording will be available at YouTube, at our All Tech as Human channel. And just check alltechashuman.org for how to get involved in general. And thank you to everyone for coming. Have a great rest of your day.